back it up a little bit. Okay. We launch a new series today entitled The Journey. The Journey. Stop, rewind. The series is called Road Trip. And the first message is entitled The Journey. Now I finally got it right. All right. Road Trip. First message, The Journey. Okay. The journey is better understood for our purposes of this series as the destiny and the purpose that God has planned for your life. That was what would define the journey. The destiny and the purpose of God's plan for your life. If you haven't memorized Jeremiah 29:11, I would recommend that you do that in whatever translation is the easiest for you. But Jeremiah 29:11 says, I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Now there's one person in this room that took that verse personally and literally. And that's David Christmas. When he read, I've got plans to give you hope, David said, yes, Lord, that's good with me. And so he married hope. I mean, take it any way you want to. David saw that as uppercase H, plans to give you hope. And David said, yes, that's me, God. That's my verse. And a future. So that's God's plan, already made, already laid out for your life. And in Proverbs 19:21, for people who have their own ideas about the journey, the direction that their life should take, it says many are the plans in a person's heart. So everybody has some ideas about their direction. Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. And the way I read that is, we may have many ideas, thoughts, speculations about the direction we think our life should go in, but when God's purpose is revealed to us, His purpose will prevail over all others. Now, it's a double meaning. His purpose will prevail. It will succeed. It will accomplish what He intends for it to. But the backside of that meaning is it will prevail over anything else that you have imagined or thought or considered as the direction your journey will take. So the journey begins with the calling. The calling is the challenge from God to move in a specific direction. I don't have this verse on the screen, but it's worth, again, you jotting down or committing to memory. That is the location of the verse. Romans 11:29. It says, God's gifts and His callings are irrevocable, never withdrawn. So that means a couple of things. Sometimes we decide to take detours in our lives. Detours that are inconsistent with the plan and the purpose of God. We just decide to go out on our own for whatever reasons that we choose to try and justify that decision. But we head in a different direction, and we're not following the plan and the purpose of God. And here's what that verse means to us. It doesn't matter how far the detour takes us away from God's intended plan and His purpose. We are still responsible for the gift that God has deposited into our life and the calling that He has placed on us for His plan and purpose. So we can take all the detours we want, trying to, like Jonah perhaps, run away from God's plan and purpose for our lives. But no matter how far the detour takes us, God will require us to find our way back to His plan and His purpose and be accountable for the gifts and the calling. The second thing it means is, no matter how far the detour takes you, God is never going to say, I wish I hadn't gifted and called that person. It's irrevocable. He will not change His mind about you. He has not changed his mind, and he will not change his mind. He wants you desperately, even more than you desire, to meet and fulfill his plan and his purpose for your life. And I'm going to explain to you why you will want to be there, and he wants you to be there in the middle of his will. The call. Moses heard a very specific call, didn't he, standing in front of a burning bush. God said, go to Egypt. And the purpose of your journey to Egypt is to really begin the journey of leading my people out of bondage that they have lived in for hundreds of years. Very clear, very specific call. Moses heard it. Joshua would hear it very clearly. At the end of Moses' life, when Moses died, Joshua would assume responsibility for the children of Israel. And standing at the border of Canaan, he would hear God tell him, I want you to lead this people into that land that I'm going to give you. Very clear, very obvious, very specific. But God doesn't always work that way. It would be nice if he did. But it doesn't always work that way. For instance, he came to Abram in Genesis chapter 12. And he said, I want you to leave your country and leave your family. Well, where am I going, Father? You're going to a land that I will show you. Seemingly very non-specific, very general in terms of God's calling. But maybe in Abram's case, he was on, like many of us probably are, a need-to-know basis. I will give you details as the adventure unfolds. For these men, I gave it very clear, very specific. For you, you just start the journey, and I'll make sure that you arrive at the planned destination. See, it'll be a test of your faith to not only hear God's call, but to accept the challenge and to begin the journey. I would speculate today that there are people in churches all over the world. I started to say all over America earlier, but I realized it's believers all over the world that have heard the call and they've received the challenge from God, but they haven't taken the first step in the journey. Because along with the call and the challenge, somehow we have to find the faith to take the first step, to do it. Okay, pause a little for some personal information. And I'm going to share some things with you that I have not shared with you ever before because they're very personal, but they fit right here. We moved back to Charleston from Jacksonville, Florida in 2007. And I had a background in the insurance industry, and so before leaving a pastoral role in Jacksonville, I applied for and was accepted and hired by an insurance company in Charleston. And so Gene and I moved back here in 2007, and I went to work for an insurance company, not realizing that in 7 years since I'd even dabbled in insurance, that thing was a monster that I did not recognize anymore. It had passed me by like I was not only standing still, but moving backwards in 7 years. So much had it changed that I became a miserable man. I did not like the job. I did not like what it demanded of me. I did not like the pressures that I was living under. It wasn't a good paying job that might compensate for some of the stress that I was living with. It finally became so difficult for me that I couldn't sleep. Maybe some of you will identify with this. In the night, I was working all night long. My mind would not, for lack of a better term, shut up. My mind was going constantly, robbing me of my sleep, robbing me of my rest, and as you know, making me even more miserable during the day. I was so miserable that I didn't want to go to work. I could hardly stand being there. I would go out to my car at lunchtime and I wouldn't eat. I'd sleep in my car with my alarm set to wake me back up to go back in. I just did not want to be there. I was a miserable man. So listen, I'm being transparent here. Everybody loves that word. I got so depressed in the middle of that my doctor put me on an antidepressant so I could sleep, so I could rest, so I could manage to get through a day. I was that miserable. I kind of likened it to what was going on with my grandson, Hunley. He hated school at the time. I mean, getting that boy to go to school was a challenge. Getting me to go to work was similar. But getting him to go to school was a challenge. He cried. He did not want to go. And I thought, here's an example. I thought one Friday that I'd help Hunley out. So school was over, and for some reason I had picked him up, and I had him with me, or we were together, and I said, Hunley, it's Friday. You don't have to go back to school till Monday. I thought that would help. You know what he said? I got to go back on Monday. He dove right into that whole drama. And I started thinking, that's how I feel. I'm glad it's Friday, but all I'm thinking about is I got to go back on Monday. I was that miserable, guys. And I was begging the Lord to let me quit. And Lord, please. I wasn't going to quit till I felt released to do that. Because I wasn't going to go to Jean and say, I'm quitting my job without being able to say to her, God's released me to do that. Finally, one morning, I woke up and I knew that God had released me from that job. I knew I could quit. Now, here's the scary part. I didn't have a job anywhere else. I had nothing out there. But I had a release from God to quit the job. I told Jean, I said, God has released me. And she knows when I've got that certainty about me, that she can trust me that I heard from God, okay, when I don't have another job. And like any woman in the household who's trying to keep a house, she's thinking, how are we going to do this? And I don't know, and I quit as soon as I got to work that day. I did not wait. When I knew God said you could quit, I went in and gave a resignation letter on the spot. Now, for the next 2 years, we call this the great adventure of our lives. 2009 to 2011, the great adventure of our lives. I was gainfully unemployed for 2 years. Gainfully unemployed. And I saw God do some of the most incredibly significant things in our life that I'd ever seen him do before. To meet needs, things that he would do. People that would respond to us. And by the way, I learned something that I want to share with you this morning. If God ever speaks to you to give someone a financial gift, okay, put it in an envelope, walk up to that person and say, God told me to give you this, and then turn around and leave. 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 Why? Why leave? Because they want to see what's in the envelope. And they're not going to look while you're standing there because they're not going to be impolite. So they're going to wait. And I had folks do that for me. Ring my doorbell, hand me an envelope, go back and get in the car, not say a word. God told me to give you this, gone. Man, yes, that's the way to do it. I can look. I remember sitting at lunch with a guy one day, just invited me to lunch. And I never expected anything to happen. Just go to lunch with this guy, and I'm sitting there, and he reaches in his pocket, and he pulls out an envelope, and he slides it across the table, and he says, God said for me to give you this. Can I tell you that in that envelope was $5,000 in cash? Gene and I were able to make it for a few months on that. Absolutely. People, listen. Now, here's the thing that you need to hear. Because when you start this journey, one of the most important things that we have to accept is this fact. There will be losses. And you have to come to grips with that truth. But I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that in just a minute. There will be losses. For instance, we accepted the fact that during this adventure of our lives that there were some material things that we might lose. Maybe we'll lose a car because we can't make a payment on it. Maybe these things that we are enjoying we won't be able to do anymore. Maybe we might even lose our house. What is all of that? Just material stuff. That's all it is. There will be losses. And here's, okay, you guys that are watching this, it's going to be pretty interesting for me to share this way. You are not supposed to live in your house after you have missed 13 payments in a row. Are you? No, you're not supposed to be there. You're supposed to be out, foreclosed, gone. We missed, not because we wanted to, we missed 13 house payments in a row. We got a letter from our mortgage company that said, fully expected, we have hired a foreclosure attorney out of Columbia and we are starting foreclosure proceedings on your house. Okay, we might lose the house. That's okay. There will be losses along the way. Jean and I were at home one day. She was outside with a friend. I was in the house. We saw the FedEx truck pull up, and the guy got out with an envelope. Not a box, an envelope. So we know that's important documents coming. Went to the door, he handed it to me, and I went and sat down on the couch, and I laid that envelope in my lap, and I said, Lord, whatever this is, I'm okay with it. Whatever it is, I'm okay with it. Pull that little zip thing off of there and open it up, and I started reading, and I could not believe what I was reading. It was not foreclosure documents. It was a loan modification that I had not even applied for. Oh, I had applied for loan modifications, but if you went through that process, you never even got talked to. All you were told was, your documents have expired, submit them again. And month after month after month, or you did the same thing over and over, and you never got, I don't know anybody that actually got one. Anybody get one that you asked for? You got one? Good for you. I couldn't get anybody to do anything. 9 months. When I finally got it, I hadn't even asked for it. In fact, they had called me and said, would you like to apply for a loan modification? I said, sure. But I never filled out one piece of paper. And I got a loan modification that allowed me to pick up payments in the next month to stay in my house. And so I'm still there. 7 years later, I'm still living in the same house because God is faithful to us. And accepting the fact that there could be losses along the way helps me be able to know that I can be successful in this. And let me move on here because I got a lot of things I need to say to you. You see, it'll be a test of your faith, as I said, to hear God's call, accept the challenge, and begin the journey. And one of the biggest obstacles you'll have to overcome is the unknown. The unknown. Following God into the unknown does something significant for you. It creates a dependency on Him. And that dependency on Him can lead you to one of the most incredible stories that you will ever be able to share. In addition to that, the courage to accept the challenge and begin the journey is in recognizing God's commitment to you. Remember I told you Joshua standing at the border of the promised land, God saying, I want you to lead these people in. Here's what he said in Joshua 1:5. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. That's God's promise of assurance to Joshua. Let me put this in the common vernacular for you and I. What was he saying to Joshua and saying to us? If you accept the challenge, I'll commit myself to you. You accept, I commit. Because the purpose of the journey is twofold. It will involve God's response to a need in others and in you. In some way, there will always be a ministry purpose that will benefit others. Our experience is beneficial not only for us, but it's beneficial for you as well. Because of what I learned, what Jean and I learned in that adventure of being completely, totally dependent upon God to meet every need of our lives. And I mean literally every need. One day she needed groceries in the house. She wrote out a grocery list of the things that she needed. We went somewhere, and when we came back, we noticed there was something on the back porch. On the back porch were bags of groceries. Jean went in and began unpacking the groceries, and she called me in the room. She said, you need to see this. Everything on my grocery list is in these bags right here. Everything. God is there to teach us something about being dependent on Him. And now you benefit because what I learned in that experience is how to depend completely on God in leading a ministry. So that I don't worry about what's in front of me. I know God is there and He's already made provision. In front of us is the need for our own facility. We need property, or we need a building that has adequate parking that we can renovate into a church. I know the need is there. I know that it's out in front of us. But I am completely at peace with this knowledge. God is there. He's already made provision for us. And I'm not going to lose sleep at night worried about it. Because I can be confident of what I learned from 2009 to 2011, that God will use people that we least expect or never anticipated. He'll use methods that we could never have even imagined to supply and to meet our needs. We learned that personally, and we carry that into this ministry corporately, that God's got this. He's got it. Don't worry about it. Does it mean we don't look? No, we look, we ask, we inquire, we speculate, we dive into, we investigate. But we don't worry because God's got it. I would not honestly be surprised to have someone call me and say, I've got land to give to your church. Wouldn't shock me at all. Why not? Now, I'd love for him to do it that way, but he'll probably figure out some other way because I said that. That's just how, that's how he works. As soon as you give God a page to color on, where's the first place He colors? Outside the lines. You cannot get Him to color in the lines. Because He's not going to be confined. He's not going to be limited to our imagination and our thoughts and our abilities. He said, my ways, think of it, my ways are higher than yours. My thoughts are higher than yours. And I'm going to do it in a way that you can't deny it was me. Boom, thumbprint all over it. God did it. He's the doer of it. Now, once we launch the journey, once we take the first step, and I'm giving you all of this as information, some of you haven't even started yet, but when you do start, here's a real key to the successful completion of your journey. Always remember God's commands. See, after saying to Joshua that I'm going to be with you, no one will be able to stand against you, assuring him of his successful outcome, here's what he says 2 verses later. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful. Isn't that interesting that God would use that terminology? You be careful. You be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. So God says, I'm going to make this promise to you. I'm going to be with you like I was with Moses. No enemy will be able to stand against you. I'm going to be there. However, condition, you will want to keep all of the law that Moses gave you. Don't go right, don't go left, observe and do everything. And he followed it up with verse 8, because here he sets an expectation. How do you want me, how do you want us to obey the law? And the answer is completely and consistently. Joshua 1:8. Keep the book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night. Here's that word again, that you may be careful. See, God is impressing upon us intentionality here. We've got to be cognizant. We've got to be aware. We've got to be conscious of every day of our lives that we conform to God's word and God's commandments. It can't be something that we treat casually. Well, today if I get it all right, fine. Tomorrow if I don't, I'll make it up. If I do one bad today, I'll do 2 goods tomorrow. God's not keeping that kind of score. There's that word. Be careful to do everything written in it. Then, once again, the same promise, then you will be prosperous and successful. If there's anybody in this room that doesn't want to be prosperous and successful, I'll be surprised. And God says to Joshua, if that's what you want, here's what you do. You lead these people into this promised land. I'll go before you. I'll defeat every enemy that appears on the horizon as long as behind the scenes you are doing what I have told you to do. Keep my word completely and consistently. We don't get to pick and choose. Jack Hayford told the story about having a young couple in his office for premarital counseling. And in the middle of the conversation, they moved into the area of sex in their marriage, and that couple confessed to him that they'd already been sexually active. However, they said, they'd prayed about it. And God said it was okay because they were engaged to be married. And so Pastor Hayford didn't say anything. He just took his Bible and folded it up and leaned around his chair and threw it in the trash can. That young couple's eyes bugged out of their heads. Pastor Jack, why did you do that? He said, I'm not preaching anymore. Why aren't you going to preach anymore? He said, because God's a liar. What do you mean God's a liar? Well, here's the thing. I know what his word says, and I know what you've said he said to you. Therefore, God has made you an exception to his word. And if God makes exceptions to his word, he can't be trusted. And I'm not doing this anymore. Now, of course, he did that just to emphasize what he was trying to say to that young couple sitting there in front of him. But the point here is what he said to Joshua. You be careful to do everything written in the law I gave to Moses. And if you'll do that, you'll be prosperous and successful. Let me go back to losses to close this out. Because there is no guarantee that you will not experience losses along the way. But losses do not define the journey. Let me tell you what defines the journey. The journey is defined by a good outcome. When we launched our great adventure and we accepted the fact that there would be losses along the way, Gene and I prayed specifically, God, we must have a good outcome. And the reason we must have a good outcome is because our children are watching. They're watching to see what happens in this journey that we said you have called us on. They're watching to see what kind of outcome there will be for their parents. And I know this about my kids like you know yours. If we had not had a good outcome, they would have been angry and bitter toward God over what he didn't do or did do for or to their mom and dad. We kept saying, Lord, our kids are watching. Our kids are watching. And we would tell the kids along the way, losses will happen, guys, but that's not the journey. Losses do not define the journey. A good outcome is what defines the journey. That's what we believe for. when we have the courage, after we've heard the call, after He's issued the challenge, to take the first step. Maybe you should do the same thing if you're in the middle of your journey. Remind God, if you don't have kids that are old enough, if you got kids at home, they're old enough. They are old enough to know, to feel what's going on in that house. They might not be able to articulate it in words, but they can sense it, they can feel it when there's stress on mom and dad and the pressure. And if the pressure's coming from the journey, then you just remind God, I got kids that are watching this. I have to have a good outcome for their sake, if for nothing else. And so I'll leave you with these very basic thoughts, plans, purposes, ideas to follow. Here they are. Number one, follow God's detailed instructions. Don't do anything differently than what He tells you to do. All right? Don't try to figure out what He meant when He said it. Just do what you understood He said. Follow God's instructions. Number two, completely and consistently obey His word. So follow and obey. And here's the third, trust Him. Trust Him for a good outcome. Follow, obey, and trust. Based on what God has said in His word, I can guarantee you, based on what God said, your outcome will be prosperous and successful. If you do those three things, and everything I've said to you in 40 minutes has been condensed into those three words: follow, obey, and trust. This morning, I imagine in this room there's three groups of people. There's probably a group of people that you haven't yet heard that specific call. You haven't gotten that very clear challenge from God to move in a direction that is His plan and purpose. That's going to require some courage on your part and some faith. Maybe you've not even heard that call yet. Or maybe there's a group of people, maybe there's some that you have heard the call and God's issued the challenge, but things have held you back. Maybe fear of the unknown, maybe your own questions about how can all of this work. I can promise you, you're never going to be able to wrap that around your head at all. How? The how's going to be in God's hands. And then the third group of people are those who are right in the middle of the journey. And what you need to hear from me this morning is losses do not define the journey. If you're experiencing some losses in the middle of this, accept the fact that there can be and probably will be, but they will not. I know I'm being redundant, but they will not define the journey. You're looking for a good outcome. So I want you to stand with me, and we're going to pray together. Father, for those who are standing here today, I posture my heart in agreement with them. First, for that group of people that are waiting to hear the call. I pray, Father, that their hearts will be receptive. Their ears will be open to hear first when you call, to accept the challenge, and then to already have the courage instilled in them to take that first step to begin the journey, to begin a great adventure that can result in a story for them to share with their children, with their grandchildren, with their friends, with their family of what you have done. For those that have heard the call and they've received the challenge, but they haven't yet found the courage to move, I pray, Father, that today there will be an infusion by your Spirit of courage into their hearts. Courage to say yes to the call, to accept the challenge, and to take that step to begin moving in that direction that you have made clear to them. And then for those who stand here this morning, Father, that are in the middle of the journey, they're looking at the reality of the possibility of experiencing losses. I pray, Father, that they will get a perspective shift today. to realize that losses probably will happen. But again, losses will not define the journey, that they will press on into the promise that you have made them, and the result will be a good outcome that will bring testimony and honor to your name. I thank you for that, Father. I believe you for it, agreeing with your people. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, if you have a guest card or a prayer request, please drop it in the giving station as you go out. Be faithful in your giving, honoring God with the first fruits of your increase. Don't forget to stop by the tree, grab a